Picture this. It's a Friday night. Someone texts you, "Hey, we're all going out tonight. You in?" And something happens inside you. Not dread exactly, not anxiety, just this quiet, almost stubborn pull back toward your couch, your lamp, your little world. You look around your living space. Maybe there's a candle burning. Maybe your favorite playlist is already on. And you think, why would I ever leave this? And then you feel it, that guilt, that little voice that says, shouldn't I want to go out? Isn't there something wrong with me? You type back, maybe next time, and you feel both deeply relieved and mildly suspicious of yourself. If any part of that resonated with you, this video is for you. Because today, we're going to talk about the psychology of people who genuinely, deeply, authentically love staying at home. Not because they're broken, not because they're antisocial, but because science actually has a lot to say about why some brains are wired this way, and why it might be one of the most underrated personality traits of our time. Let's start with what most people get wrong. When society pictures someone who prefers staying home, it tends to paint a very specific and very unfair picture. Lonely, unmotivated, afraid of the world, maybe wearing the same hoodie for 3 days. But here's the thing, the psychology tells a completely different story. Research in personality science consistently shows that a preference for solitude is not a deficit, it is a difference. A meaningful, neurologically grounded difference in how certain people process stimulation, social energy, and inner experience. The psychologist Elaine Aron, who spent decades studying what she called highly sensitive people, found that roughly 15 to 20% of the population has a nervous system that processes sensory and emotional information more deeply than average. For these people, a crowded bar isn't just loud, it's overwhelming. It's like trying to have a conversation while someone runs a blender next to your ear and strobes a flashlight in your face. Staying home isn't avoidance, it's calibration. It's the brain saying, I need an environment that matches my processing speed. And then there's introversion, which is one of the most misunderstood concepts in popular psychology. People tend to think introversion means shyness or not liking people, but the actual definition, the one rooted in decades of research starting with Carl Jung, is much simpler than that. Introverts draw energy inward. Extroverts draw energy from the outside world. It's not about whether you like people, it's about where your battery gets charged. For an introvert, a long evening alone isn't emptiness, it's fuel. And here's where it gets genuinely fascinating. Neuroscience has found that introverts and extroverts actually have different baseline levels of cortical arousal. The introvert's brain is, on average, already running hotter, more internally active, more prone to deep processing, more sensitive to external input. So when an introvert walks into a loud social setting, their brain is essentially going from already busy to completely overloaded. The extrovert, whose brain craves that extra stimulation, experiences the same environment as just getting started. Same party, two completely different neurological realities. This is why homebodies don't just prefer quiet environments, they thrive in them. At home, the introvert or the highly sensitive person can think clearly. They can be creative. They can have conversations that go somewhere. They can exist without constantly managing the noise of other people's energy. Home becomes less of a place and more of a psychological sanctuary, a carefully curated space where the self can finally exhale. Now, there's another layer to this that doesn't get talked about enough. It has to do with imagination. Research on personality has consistently found that people high in a trait called openness to experience, curiosity, creativity, a rich inner life, often prefer environments where their mind can wander freely. And home, it turns out, is the ultimate wandering space. When you're not navigating social dynamics or commuting or performing the 1,000 micro-adjustments that public life demands, your mind is free to do what it does best: make connections, process feelings, build ideas. Virginia Woolf, and yes, we're going literary for a second, wrote about the necessity of a room of one's own, not just for writing, but for thinking, for the kind of sustained inner work that evaporates the moment you're surrounded by other people. She understood, perhaps intuitively, what psychologists have since confirmed, that depth of thought requires depth of solitude. The people who love staying home are often the same people building elaborate inner worlds, processing complex emotions, or doing quiet creative work that the outside world never sees but absolutely benefits from. But let me be honest with you, because this wouldn't be complete without it. Loving home isn't always purely psychological elegance. Sometimes it tips into something harder. Sometimes the couch becomes a hiding place rather than a sanctuary. There's a difference between choosing solitude because it feeds you and defaulting to isolation because the world feels like too much effort. One is a personality style. The other can be a symptom of depression, of anxiety, of burnout, of grief. And it matters to know which one you're in. The way to tell the difference: notice how you feel when you're alone. Does your home feel like a warm, chosen space? Or does it feel like the only place you're not afraid? Does the idea of going out sometimes genuinely excite you, even if you also love staying in? Or has the outside world started to feel like a threat you'd rather not face? Solitude is healthy when it restores you. It becomes something else when it starts to shrink your life. If you recognize yourself in that second description, it might be worth gently investigating what's underneath it. Not because staying home is wrong, but because you deserve to choose it freely, not to be imprisoned by it. For most people watching this, though, I suspect the experience is much more the first kind. You love your home because you are someone who lives richly on the inside. You love it because you've built a life that actually makes sense to you, in a world that constantly tries to tell you that more stimulation, more socializing, more doing is always better. Here's what the psychology ultimately says about you if you're a homebody. You are likely someone with a complex inner life, a high capacity for independent thought, and a sensitivity to your environment that, when honored, becomes a genuine superpower. You probably give more to the relationships you do invest in, because you're not spreading yourself thin across 100 surface-level interactions. You probably notice things others miss: the mood shift in a room, the subtext beneath a conversation, the beauty in an ordinary afternoon. You are not less than the person who thrives in chaos. You are differently calibrated for a different kind of depth. And maybe the reframe that matters most is this: in a world addicted to noise, choosing quiet is not weakness. It is, in its own quiet way, an act of radical self-knowledge. You know what you need. You protect it. That's not something most people manage. So the next time someone raises an eyebrow at your Friday night plans, which involve a book, a blanket, and absolutely no one ringing your doorbell, you can smile and know something they might not. You're not hiding from life. You're living it on your own terms in the environment where you actually come alive. And I think that's worth celebrating. If this video described you or someone you love, I'd genuinely love to know in the comments. Are you a homebody? What does your ideal night in look like? And do you ever feel the social pressure to pretend otherwise? Let's talk about it down below, because these conversations are exactly why I make these videos. If you're new here, consider subscribing. We go deep on psychology, behavior, and the quiet mechanics of what makes people who they are. I'll see you in the next one.